you know. His dog was Pitou, and every day, every dog goes up where we were then, you see, it was Tupti or Pitou. Those are the only two names we ever knew about dogs. And but Bill fell in love with this one he called Pitou. And he was a tough dog. He was no little baby puppy. He was a tough dog. But Bill was tough. Not mean tough, but he was tough. But then the war comes. And of course, Bill was sort of our big wheel, because Dad was close to a heart attack. He'd had a heart attack, but he got over it. But then he was given just a couple of years to live. But then anyway, Bill goes to war. Well, let's see. The war then lasted from 39 to 45. When the boys were coming home was in 1945. Bill was later coming home because he was a regimental sergeant major, and he felt when he was asked to take care of you check each man to put him on the boat to go home. And he was asked to do that. So it put him later getting home. He didn't come right home after the war. There were quite a few months to get those men all located and back on the boat and all this. And it was a very tough job. He said, that's the hardest job anybody could ever do. You had to sort things out because these men were that many years away from home. And I had a lot of friends everywhere they went. Canadian Army was very well liked everywhere. And so they wanted to go around as much as they could to say goodbye to some of the people they'd met and some families that were good to them. And he said it was a long, hard job. But finally he said, I forget D-Day, I think it was August, but he only got home during the winter, late February, I think. And he had quite a few stories to tell. But anyway, the first thing he asked Dad, how's my dog? The doggone old dog was still alive, in harness. We had the harness to bring him up 12 miles home. And he was there as Bill put the harness on him, and he was caressing. And we never did that, that was, those days you didn't caress animals but the dog was caressing him. And he got him home, and he was very old by then. As a dog's life, he was very old. And we found him dead next morning.
Oh.
Yeah. And Bill was sobbing. He wasn't shy to cry, He hugged him and he said, "You faithful old dog, you brought me home. Well, thank you." And Mommy, everybody was crying because of the reaction between the dog and the man. And Bill talked about that for years after. He said he'd never forget it. I always thought the dog must have died because Dad was a rough boss on dogs, He really put them to work. And this whole thing kept going. But when he was near the end of him, when it was time for Bill to come home, so Dad started treating him real good and giving him, he said, try to make it. He kept petting him and saying, you just wait a little bit and he'll be home. And so when you did the poor animal, he was a husky. You'll see sometime it was a real husky. And we're always afraid of him. They said, you don't ever tease these dogs. They're not to be teased because they won't take any teasing. He never bit anybody.
How long was Uncle Bill gone?
But, hey?
How long had Uncle Bill been gone?
Well, the war was from 39 to 45.
He was gone all that time?
And then, no, because then of course he went and joined right away. But they looked up his history and they said that the dad had a heart attack and couldn't live a long time. So they didn't take him right away. So he waited and waited for a letter when they'd accept him. And they put him through all their, all the paperwork for his health. And finally he got the ticket that he could go. And Mom went with him down to Quebec to the train with those days what a fur coat was. It was a cloth coat, heavy wool, and a big string of fur like this and went around. That was the fur coat in those days for poor people. And she was down to meet him. Apparently Auntie Jane cried for a day after. She said, we're all there, she said. But, well, we were the closest to Auntie Jane, and her boys had all come back one by one, and this last one was Bill. And he came down. In those days, you wore the uniform till it wore out. Today you must, well, that was if you could afford it, you could buy a dress uniform. And of course, well, he wouldn't have spent his money on it anyway. He said, no, that's it. And that's why we kept that old jacket on. But Mom met him. Apparently, a few people around were just with her when she was sobbing with joy, and they him too. And we had then she hoped that the dog was still living because she's in Quebec and she was waiting there for the boat to come in. And then Quebec City was a big seaport, probably still is. So the great, we call it, we had a name for the boat bringing sailors home, so bringing them home. But anyway, there was a name. But the people at Lower Town, not because of Bill, but because their boys were coming home, more and more of the leftovers and the ones that had been prisoners of war in the other countries and had to go through a lot of paperwork. So it took time. But when we had a newspaper, and the Chronicle Telegraph, of course, was there. I kept those papers for years. They burnt with all of our other stuff that burnt up there. And And we had all of every boy and the whole family and friends. We kept pictures in the newspaper, and I kept all those. And Mom with her fur coat. Oh my goodness. She was, it's a 12-mile walk, you know. And you didn't just ride home, you know. But Bill's dog was going to pull Bill home.
So he got there by boat and then you all got on the train?
Well, we had a mile to walk on the railroad track, and then we crossed the Beniscana River, but then it was frozen. It was February, and that was no problem. It was only some years after that I had problem there, but then Dad had a road. We had a road, you know, on the river. Make sure we knew how to make it solid. We'd follow a certain area. He taught us how to. He said, rivers where there is a heavy current, use your head when the ice comes. And he taught us how to know where there was no ice breaking up with the current. Like, remember those teachings he'd give us on how to cross that river? And, well, of course, they had to, at Linton, to get up to that river, to cross it, to get to our road, well, of course, the family Collins were there, and then one of the railroad men had a speeder. In those days, it was a four-wheel. Anyway, he came and he drove Mom and Bill up the trail, up the railroad, 1 mile, and there was a story there about that boat. But anyway, well, we got Bill home. Of course, all the best food that he ever loved was made. And of course, Mom with the coat on still. We had pictures and pictures, and we always laughed about the coat. Because nobody bought anything in those days. That was every good article went to the war. So you bought just leftovers, so we never bought anything really. We used whatever we could around hanging. Americans would send us their old clothes, and some of them were pretty good. And I kept one suit. When the house burned down, it was still there. A beautiful wool suit from Abercrombie and Fitch. And the whole outfit.
Just a second.
But anyway.